Good morning, students. In the last class, we have completed our syllabus. From today's class onwards, let us revise our syllabus. I may briefly introduce the chapter. First, in the following classes, I will explain certain important questions and answers of this chapter and followed by the remaining other chapters also, which may be helpful for the preparation of your board exams. Right. Life process. We have discussed and elaborate about this chapter in the starting itself. Anyhow, let us have a brief gist about this chapter. And life means flow of energy, which is present in living organisms. How can we identify the living organisms? Most of the living organisms are identified as living organisms by using visible movement as the characteristic. But using visible movement as the defining characteristic of life, it is not enough in the case of some organisms because they do not actually exhibit the outer feature like a visible movement. And we cannot simply say that as it is not exhibiting any outer visible movement, it is dead like that. It is still alive, but outer visible movement is not exhibited by that organism. So, as some organisms do not exhibit clear outer visible movement, we cannot take visible movement as the defining characteristic of life. And a visible movement cannot be taken as the defining characteristic of life. Okay, right. In the case of some organisms, all living organisms have invisible molecular movements that are necessary for life. See, outside whatever the visible movement is taking place or not, irrespective of outer visible movement, inside in every living organism, as long as the organism is alive, molecular movements will be taking place which are not visible to our naked eyes. That's why they are called invisible molecular movements. Viruses, they do not show any molecular movements of their own. So there is a controversy about whether they are truly alive or not. As long as viruses infect, they do not infect any living host cell, they do not exhibit any molecular movements of their own. Even after infecting a host cell also, they only replicate themselves, that's it. No other molecular movements are going to be exhibited by them. As viruses do not show any molecular movements of their own, there is a controversy about the viruses, whether they are truly alive or not. Okay. All living organisms, they are alive. They maintain the flow of energy by the virtue of having an orderly organized body structure. If this orderly organized body structure is lost, then the organism cannot maintain the flow of energy and it will die. But all living organisms are living in some particular types of environments. This environment, is it not going to cause any, or is it not going to exert any forces on the living organisms? Nothing like that. The environment may exert some forces on the bodies of the living organisms. So some wear and tear will always taking place in the bodies of the living organisms. If this wear and tear is not repaired, the organism may tend to lose its orderly organized structure. If orderly organized structure is lost, what will happen? The flow of energy cannot be maintained and the organism is going to die. So, certain activities should continuously take place inside the living organism body that will maintain and repair that will maintain the body of that will maintain the orderly organized body of the organism, and that will keep repairing the damages that they take place due to the environmental pressures or any other external pressures. In order to keep maintaining the ordered organized structure, and in order to repair if any damage that takes place due to environmental effects, molecules must move all around the time. So why molecular movements take place? In order to maintain the orderly organized structure of the organisms, and in order to repair if any damage that takes place due to the environmental effects, molecules must keep making their movement. And what are life processes? The processes which together perform the maintenance job of the organized structure of the living organisms. The processes which together perform the maintenance job of the organized structure of the living organisms are known as life processes. And these life processes need energy. Why do life processes need energy? Life processes or the maintenance processes are needed to prevent damage and breakdown. Simply to speak, they are needed to prevent the wear and tear that is occurring in the body. Since they are needed to prevent the damage and breakdown, they need energy. There are 4 types of life process. They are nutrition, respiration, transportation, and excretion. And life process need energy, that already we have discussed. And the source of energy is known as food. The source of energy is known as food, right? So first life process, that is nutrition. What is nutrition? Already we have discussed the source of energy is food. The process of transfer of source of energy or food from the outside the body of the organism to its inside. The process of transfer of source of energy from the outside the body of the organism to its inside is known as nutrition. And not only energy, in order the body size to grow, additional raw materials are continuously needed until the full growth is achieved by the living organism. So in order to grow the body size of the organisms, additional raw material also will be taken from outside, in the form of the same food itself. So food is the source of energy for life process and raw materials to grow the body size of the organisms. So food is the source of energy for life process and raw materials to grow the body size of the organism. Food sources, most of the food sources are carbon based because life on earth is based on carbon based molecules. Since life on earth is based on carbon based molecules, food sources are carbon based. There are different complexities of the food sources. So different kinds of nutritional process are used by different organisms. Since the complexity of food sources are different nutritional process are utilized by the different organisms. There are different sources of energy. So a uniform source of energy has to be made in all organisms. This uniform source of energy can be made either the breakdown of complex food into simpler food or combining certain simpler molecules of food to make or to bring those molecules to the level of uniform source of energy. Then this uniform source of energy can be utilized for molecular movements. Right. Food has to be converted to uniform source of energy for molecular movements, and food has to be converted to the kind of molecules for the needed for the body growth. So food has to be converted to two things. What are those two things? To uniform source of energy. For what? For molecular movements. And the kind of molecules for what? Needed for body growth. There are certain oxidizing reducing reactions that help in the breakdown of the food molecules. Right? Oxidizing reducing reactions are the most common chemical means for the breakdown of food molecules, which utilize oxygen in most of the organisms. So this oxygen has to be taken from outside to inside, and then it has to be utilized for the breakdown of food in order to make it to uniform source of energy, right? So what is that process is known as? The process of acquiring of oxygen from outside the body of the organism and to use it in the process of breakdown of food sources for cellular needs is known as respiration. What is respiration? The process of acquiring of oxygen from outside the body of the organism and to use it in the inside of the organism in the process of breakdown of food sources for cellular needs. For cellular needs is known as respiration. If you take the single-celled organisms like amoeba, paramecium or some bacteria, for uptake of food, gases exchange and for removal of wastes, specific organs are not needed, and everything is carried out by a process known as simple diffusion. How is it possible that everything is carried out by simple diffusion process? Because the entire surface of the organism is in direct contact with the environment, since it is a unicellular organism. Since it is only one cell, the entire surface of the organism is in direct contact with the environment. So simple diffusion alone can carry out uptake of food, gases exchange, removal of wastes, etc., etc. But is it going to be possible in the case of multicellular organisms? In large, complex, multicellular organisms, all of the cells may not be in direct contact with the surrounding environment. So, simple diffusion alone cannot meet all of the body requirements like a uptake of food, gases exchange, expelling of wastes, all these things in such a multicellular organisms. Why? All the cells may not be in direct contact with the environment. So, simple diffusion cannot meet all the body requirements in such complex multicellular organisms. And in these type of organisms, the food and oxygen are taken up at one place, whereas they are going to be utilized by all parts of the body. Food and oxygen, where they are entering and where they are getting utilized. The places of the entry of food and oxygen and places of the utilization of food and oxygen, are they same? No, they are different. So, from the places of their entry to the places of their utilization, the food and oxygen have to be carried. After the utilization, certain waste byproducts are formed inside the cells, and these waste byproducts should not be present within the cells. They have to be discarded out from the body. And this discarding process of the waste byproducts is carried out by some specific tissue, excretory tissue. So these waste byproducts have to be carried from all of the cells to excretory tissue. So carrying of food from the site, food and oxygen from the site of their entry to the site of utilization, and carrying of metabolic waste byproducts from all cells to excretory tissue is done by specific system called transportation system, and the process is known as transportation. The process of carrying the food and oxygen from the site of their entry in the body to the site of their utilization in the body, and carrying the metabolic wastes from the places of their formation to the places from where they are discarded out from the body is known as transportation. What is transportation? The process of carrying the food and oxygen from the site of their entry in the body to the site of their utilization, and carrying the metabolic wastes from the places of their formation to the places from where they are discarded out from the body is known as transportation. Just now we have discussed, after utilizing food and oxygen inside the cells in certain chemical reactions, waste byproducts are formed. Chemical reactions that use carbon source and the oxygen for energy generation create certain byproducts. These byproducts are not only useless but also harmful. So these metabolic waste byproducts have to be removed out from the body and have to be discarded out from the body. So there is a specific process that is carrying out this process, that is known as excretion. Removal of the metabolic waste byproducts from the body and discarding them out is called excretion, and it is carried out by separate tissue or separate organ system known as excretory system. The metabolic waste byproducts are transported from all of the cells to the excretory tissue by transportation system only. In complex multicellular higher structural organization having organisms, there are certain specific organ systems which are meant for each and every specific life process. For nutrition, there is one particular organ system. For respiration, there is one particular organ system. For transportation, there is one particular organ system. And for excretion, there is another particular organ system. So in complex multicellular higher structural organization having organisms, specific organ systems are present for every particular life process.